from a number of countries, including in Africa. But the measures have been put in place designed to prevent knee-jerk redundancies, and in some cases even civil unrest, and settle the economy. At least it can be put back on a steady footing, but it needs to go back on a steady footing, and we're all praying for a vaccine. The furlough, I want to talk a bit about the furlough scheme in the UK, just to show the sort of things we've been doing. Introduced in March by our Chancellor, we've now got about 1 point even in leading brands. And so there's this terrible balance, which no doubt you've been talking about earlier on today, about getting the economy back working as quickly as possible against the health impacts of unlocking society, especially on vulnerable parts of the community. I must say, as I think you picked up, Mirian, earlier, and I think others were commenting on, a number of the recent announcements are probably the result of the pandemic acting as a catalyst rather than a cause of the underlying issues which have been faced, for example, in retail in the UK. And that's a very similar thing which I'm seeing across Africa in respect, in particular, for example, on sovereign debt, where chickens are coming to home roost rather than sooner than they expected, but we always expected them to come home to roost. And so these things, and I think that it's picking up what Justice was saying earlier. Obviously in Africa, and I think again, picking up comrades' comments, 80 or 90% of the workforce is in the informal economy. And frankly, and governments can't print cash like they are doing in Europe. So staying at home is a luxury that can't be afforded, and lockdowns have a much different impact, and they do elsewhere. And I'm seeing that in my conversations I talk regularly across the piece, and it's the same everywhere in Africa, that the lockdown issues are really difficult, and particularly in South Africa, where I have colleagues, it's been very difficult there with the townships. If there's a choice between you'd rather get COVID than not eat, frankly, in some cases. And so things have been done, but it's very difficult. And as I think was commented earlier, the picture is quite bleak. The African Union was talking about 20 million job losses. African Development Bank's now talking about 30 million. And there's 3 million already in South Africa, of which 2 million are women. And I don't think this isn't the time to talk about it, but I think the impact on women in employment is particularly difficult to talk about. The reaction in respect to support in Africa has been global, because it's clear from my discussions, I'm on the Africa Investors Group from the UK, and elsewhere as well. People are talking a lot about how they can support Africa. They know it's their duty to do so, and it's in everyone's interest to do so. So you've got COVID funds, multilaterals are putting in place big funds, but because what people are looking to do is see Africa as taking a bigger step forward. The African Union talked about a new paradigm for Africa, in which Africa is taking a new role in the global supply chain, competing with China, taking advantage of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, adding value to things in Africa for Africa. And this is something which lawyers in Africa, the legal profession, has to get a grip of and has to take advantage of, with a lot more cross-border trade, which means more jobs for people in Africa. The legal market in the UK and globally, just to touch on that, we've all been challenged, as you've quite rightly pointed out, and we have seen some redundancies across the piece globally, particularly in non-legal staff. But overall, my sense is that the profession as a whole globally has been able to respond virtually and remotely in a way that many would have felt impossible a year ago, to think how we can work. We've all learned things like Zoom and the like we're talking about now. I hadn't even heard of Zoom 6 months ago, to be honest. Don't tell my colleagues that. But these are things which lawyers seem to be able to be picking up on, and they're becoming embedded in, you talked about a new normal. There's no way we're going to go back to where we were 6 months ago in the legal profession. And Hogan Lovells, we've been doing a lot of work on remote. I'm part of the green team going on 1 week, and we have a red team going in the next week. We're maintaining presence, and in fact, my theme on my Africa practice is that I want to remain present. So many of you will have attended our own virtual Africa forum. I've been doing regular podcasts and we have weekly discussions with our friends across the piece. So I'm delighted also that we've been able to pass on, because we've hit it earlier than you in the continent. We've got a lot of learnings which I've been able to pass on in terms of how to deal with basic administrative things there.
That's wonderful.
And finally, we'll talk about this in our discussions, obviously, but the legal practice Courts have been moving. Without courts, you don't have justice, and justice is denied. With courts, you've probably read in Tanzania, the courts were kept open and lawyers died. Friends of mine have died from going to court. So therefore, there's a really difficult balance to be maintained in keeping courts open, which means it's gone remote. In the UK, most big cases are held remotely. There's new protocols being brought in place, improved technical stuff. On the employment side, tribunals are almost universally now held remotely. They started with smaller matters, they've moved to bigger matters, and the overall feedback has been very positive. There are serious issues around fairness, particularly as regards who's got the best technology. Can you look people in the eye? Can you deal with people? But overall, it's where we are. It's how it's going to be. So COVID's brought us face to face with a whole new range of challenges for everybody. But with flexibility and innovation, we think we can move on. And I recommend everybody else picks it up and does so as well, because the world isn't going to wait for us, particularly as a legal profession, which historically has been very conservative. We need to get on with it, and I think we'll succeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That was really, really useful, and it has also thrown up a lot of issues. And I'm going to turn to Inam now, because I hear £15 billion a month. I hear about the pandemic acting as a catalyst and not a cause. And I'm wondering what it means for us Nigerian lawyers within the Nigerian labor law scenario.